It was just another peaceful morning on my ranch, until it wasn't. You know, life always feels so normal until someone walks up to your front door with a clipboard and a smug smile. And then it all changes. I was sitting on my porch, enjoying the sound of the birds and the quiet rustling of the wind through the trees. That was until I heard her voice. "You need to leave." Not exactly the words you expect from your friendly neighborhood HOA representative. But there she was, Karen, the self-proclaimed ruler of our little community, armed with nothing but entitlement and an absurd sense of superiority. She wasn't here for a friendly visit. She wasn't even here to chat about neighborhood regulations. No, she was here to demand that I move out. And get this, her son needs my ranch. Apparently, my peaceful life is standing in the way of her son's future. What could I do? Pack up and leave? Or fight back? Well, let's just say the story doesn't end with me packing my bags. No, this was just the beginning of something much bigger. Stick around. I'm about to show you how the tables turned. It gets wild. So, here I was, minding my own business, living my dream of a quiet ranch life. I wasn't bothering anyone. In fact, I was the ideal neighbor. I kept my land in pristine shape, followed every HOA rule to a T, and even volunteered for community cleanups. Yet, for some reason, Karen didn't seem to see things the same way. Her name? Karen Whitaker, the president of the HOA. She lived 2 houses down from me and made it clear, through passive-aggressive gestures and exaggerated concerns, that she was the self-appointed gatekeeper of the neighborhood's standards. The woman had a stick up her. Well, let's just say she had a very firm idea of how things should be run. It all started a few months ago when I put up a small, discreet fence to keep my dogs from wandering off the property. It was nothing extravagant, just some low wooden planks. But somehow, Karen saw this as an abomination against the HOA code. She knocked on my door, clipboard in hand, with the same smug look she had on that fateful day. "Nice fence, but it's not allowed here. You need to tear it down." I didn't budge. I politely told her I'd follow up with the HOA board, and that was that. Or so I thought. But it didn't end there. Oh no. A few weeks later, Karen noticed my porch was a little too cluttered for her liking. Apparently my outdoor furniture was out of place and didn't fit the HOA's vision of aesthetic harmony. I smiled, nodded, and agreed to tidy up. But I could tell. She was watching, waiting for her next opportunity. Then, one morning, I woke up to find a warning letter in my mailbox. A fine for unauthorized construction. My fence, of course. The penalty was steep. Way too steep. But there was no name on the letter. Just a faceless HOA complaint. I felt the heat rising in my chest. Why couldn't she just let me live in peace? That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about rules. This was personal. The pressure was mounting. But Karen wasn't done yet. One morning, as I was pulling out of my driveway, I saw her again. And that's when she dropped the bombshell. "I need your ranch, and I'm going to get it." That was just the beginning. After that, the gloves really came off. First came the incessant fines, each one more absurd than the last. Unapproved lawn gnome placement. Excessive bird feeders. I kid you not. I received a fine for a single birdhouse. At first, I thought they were mistakes, but then I realized I was being targeted. Every little detail of my life was under scrutiny, and Karen had her hands all over it. I tried calling the HOA board, but they were no help. They told me to follow the rules and never questioned her authority. So I did what any sane person would do. I tried to ignore it. But ignoring Karen's wrath, that was impossible. The real turning point came when one of my vehicles, an old pickup truck, broke down in my yard. It was no big deal. I was going to fix it as soon as I had time. But Karen called the HOA again, claiming my broken-down vehicle was lowering property values. And bam, another fine. This time, I wasn't going to pay it. And that's when the sabotage started. I noticed the gate to my ranch was suddenly off its hinges. The locks were tampered with. My tools went missing. And then one morning, I found my fence, the one she had already fined me for, completely torn down. It wasn't just the fines or the complaints anymore. Karen was actively working against me. At this point, the stress was unbearable. I started losing sleep, worried about what she might do next. But then, there was a small victory. I got a public records request and discovered a piece of crucial information. Karen had been issuing illegal fines under her own name, bypassing the HOA's official channels. But it wasn't enough yet. I still had to find a way to stop her. I wasn't going to let her drive me out of my home. Not without a fight. I just needed the right plan. After a lot of sleepless nights, I had a breakthrough. I'd been collecting evidence, documenting everything. The fines, the letters, the broken fence, the tampered locks. But what I needed was something bigger. Something that would expose Karen's hypocrisy and put an end to her reign of terror. I began planning. First, I contacted a lawyer. I needed legal support to fight the fines and bring attention to Karen's shady tactics. Then, I started making connections with neighbors who were equally fed up with her constant meddling. One evening, I stood on my porch, overlooking my property, and felt a calm confidence wash over me. I had everything I needed. The plan was in motion. I began reaching out to my neighbors, one by one. Slowly but surely, I convinced them to rally against Karen's behavior. Some of them had already been victims of her complaints, and others simply didn't like her authoritarian attitude. Together, we had enough votes to dissolve her position as HOA president. Then, it was time to take action. I printed out a series of legal notices and HOA bylaws, highlighting how Karen had violated almost every rule in the book. I even had the perfect visual moment. Some homemade signs that I placed in front of her house. HOA corruption, they read. It was time to turn the tables. And when I finally confronted her, the expression on her face was priceless. The day of the final showdown arrived. I showed up at the next HOA meeting with my lawyer, my evidence, and my neighbors by my side. Karen wasn't expecting a full-blown revolt. When the board began reviewing my evidence, it was clear that her grip on the community was slipping. Karen's face went pale as each piece of evidence was presented. The fines she had issued? Illegal. The harassment? Unethical. And the sabotages? Criminal. As the meeting progressed, it became clear. Karen was finished. The board voted to remove her from her position. And then, as if the universe had orchestrated it, I stood up and said, I think it's time to give my ranch back to the community. Her son's dreams of taking over the ranch? Gone. When I walked out of that meeting, I couldn't help but smile. Justice was served. So, what did I learn from all this? It's simple. Don't let anyone walk all over you, especially when they think they can control your life with a few rules and threats. Stand up for yourself, gather your evidence, and never underestimate the power of community. If you've ever faced an HOA nightmare, share your story in the comments. What would you have done if Karen came to your door with that clipboard? And if you made it to the end of this wild ride, comment "Justice served" to let me know you're with me. Remember, sometimes the best way to deal with a Karen is to outsmart her at her own game. And trust me, that's exactly what I did. Until next time, stay strong, stay smart, and keep living life on your terms.